Hi, my name is Carrie Fishburne. I'm doing a report for Teach Now on Module 5, Unit 2, Activity 3. Today I'm going to talk about interviews I conducted with two grade 2 teachers at my international school here in Mongolia. The first teacher is Jennifer Gilmore. She teaches grade 2 at the American School Ulaanbaatar.
I have been teaching for almost 10 years. Most of that experience was ESL, kids and adults and university students in 8 different countries. Maybe 4 years of it was teaching English language arts at an elementary school. And then for the past year, I've been teaching grade 2 at an international school. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in non-related education, and I have a grade 1 through 6 elementary school teacher certification through Teach Now in Washington, D.C.
And the next teacher is Miss Diane Height. She teaches also second grade at the American School of Ulaanbaatar.
I've taught all grades, kindergarten to 5th grade, except for 3rd grade. And when I was in 5th grade, we were the only school in the district that had 5th grade. We had departments, and so I taught writing and PE, so each had our specialized area, and it really worked with the kids. And they moved classes the way you do in middle school and high school. And when I was in kindergarten, at that time, everything was more developmental, which I still believe in, but I was one of the few people that introduced a reading program into kindergarten, so that was also very innovative. I've taught in the United States, in California, specifically Orange County. I was part of the Capistrano Unified School District. I've taught, this is my 5th year teaching in Mongolia as an international teacher, and I taught for about a half a year in East Timor, 2nd grade. I taught a combination of 1st and 2nd grade. That was my first combo class, and in Mongolia I've taught 1st grade and 2nd grade, but not as a combo.
So, as you can see, there's a lot of experience between these two teachers that I interviewed. They gave both insightful answers to questions I asked them about their lesson planning process, as well as other factors such as administration, collaboration, what they have learned in lesson planning process, and how things have changed since they have been teaching. Let's take a look at some of those things that I have learned. One of the questions that we talked about is if the school requires a specific lesson plan template. Both teachers said no, and I can concur with that. Our school does not require a certain lesson planning template. Another question that was asked is, are you given the standards and objectives by the school that you need in order to plan your lessons effectively? Both teachers said definitely yes. Our school goes by the Ontario curriculum in all areas. They also go by the Ontario curriculum in social studies. However, we try to tailor that towards Mongolian culture. And one of the things that both teachers said that part is difficult to plan lessons in social studies because there's not a lot of resources to teach for Mongolian culture. So that was one of their comments. Another question that was asked is, do teachers at your school write a lesson plan for every lesson? Miss Gilmore said that she doubted it. that most teachers have a bird's eye outline of what they're going to do based upon the end standard and work backwards towards the objectives. Miss Diane Height also said the same thing, and as a teacher at the school, I can agree with that. I have my end standards and objectives. However, I don't make full out lesson plans for every lesson, and I make outlines every day for each class. Another question was, does the school require lesson unit plans to be submitted to administrators, parents, and if so, how often should they be submitted? The unit plans must be submitted to administration, and these are usually required during the first month of school. Lesson plans are not required every day. And according to what our teacher said, that they do have to submit lesson plans on a program called Teacher Plus Portal. That is the program that we use at our school to record grades. And there is one program that's connected to that called the Parent Portal. And teachers should put their lesson plans or kind of a basic outline of these plans on the Parent Plus portal so that the parents can see what is happening in their child's class. Now, Miss Diane Height said one of the fallbacks of this is all of these lesson plans are done in English. Most of the parents don't speak English and have a very low understanding of the English language. So that's a glitch that needs to be figured out eventually, is how can we help the parents understand what is happening in their kids' lessons in spite of being able to have it on the internet. How closely do teachers in your school follow lesson plans? Miss Gilmore said that basically teachers have to be flexible. And the reality is different from what the plan looks like because the kids are different and every day looks different. So flexibility is kind of a key factor. So you have a basic outline, but you have to be flexible. And Miss Height said the same thing. She's like, yes, it's absolutely essential to have a lesson plan, but making sure that that lesson plan is fluid and changeable. Being flexible in how you teach is number one, is what Miss Diane exactly said. She said that last year they didn't finish the math book because the kids were a little bit lower level. And so she wanted to make sure that they mastered the skills that they were learning. And then the last 3 to 4 chapters of the math book, she introduced the concepts so that they would at least have an idea going into 3rd grade. I would like to share with you one of the answers for one of the questions. The question is, how often do you change your lesson plan while teaching? Let's listen to what these teachers have to say about that.
Well, if I do make any changes to the plan, it's typically due to timing. So things often take a lot longer than I anticipate. I think as I get more skilled, as I learn more about my students and their abilities, I'll be able to better gauge how long different activities will take, and then I'll be able to more closely adhere to my plan.
It's hard to put a number on that. That's probably not what you're after, but I am able to see or to figure out whether or not this is working, whether I need to extend it, shorten it. Extending it meaning let's go into the next day, let's forget it, we've done enough. So I keep going back to the word flexibility.
One of the things that I think is important as a teacher, as you can hear Miss Gilmore and Miss Hyde talk about, again, is flexibility. Even in my own teaching, I have a lesson plan, and I see that the kids aren't getting it. So I kind of have to rearrange everything, stop, take a moment, think about what is it my kids are not getting, why are they not getting it, and how far can I go back, and then try it again, re-teach the foundational skill. So I agree with especially Miss Diane and what she was saying about being flexible with teaching these lesson plans. One of the questions that I asked Miss Gilmore and Miss Hyatt was, does the school require lesson unit plans to be submitted to administrators, parents? And if so, how often should they be submitted? Let's listen into what they had to say.
The school doesn't require, we do have a parent portal that's part of our Ridecker report card system, and we're encouraged to put at least a limited form of lesson plan on there, something that the parents can refer to. One of the problems, however, is it's all in English, and we have many parents that don't have limited vocabulary when it comes to English, and definitely when it comes to reading English. So it's not mandated.
Yes, one of the things that we are asked of the first month of school is to submit unit plans for the entire year. And I know that unit plans vary from school to school. What does that mean? At our school, it means an overview of the entire year. And so my unit plans for one of my ESL classes is from week 1 to the last week of school. And then I talk about the topics that I'm going to discuss week by week throughout the whole school. And a little bit of a description of what those topics are, some of the key vocabulary, the structure, sentence structures that will be done, and then the dates of that week. A question that I asked Miss Gilmore, in which she gave really insightful answer, was, what is something you wish you knew about lesson planning before you started your teaching career? I'd like for you to hear her perspective on this.
I wish that I would have, or what I would suggest to a new teacher would be get a really good sense overall of everything that you need to teach in all of the subjects, and then look for places that have crossover. Like, look for opportunities where you can teach from a multidisciplinary point of view, and look for things and time your lesson plan, your new unit plans, which then lead to your lesson plans, based on those crossovers. So if there's a connection between, say, math and science, then teach those two things together whenever you can.
I may not be a new teacher, but this advice is really helpful for even, I think, seasoned teachers, to bring two different areas together and connecting them. One of the most amazing teachers I've ever observed in all of my teaching years is a teacher that I worked with last year, Miss Kurtzwig. She was phenomenal at doing this. She would, in her language arts class, have a book, that would, it could be about wind, girl and the wind. And then during the language arts discussion, she would stop the kids, and then she would connect it to their science lesson. And then the kids would talk about what they were learning in science. And she did this in practically every single class. And I was in her class 2 to 3 times a week for ESL support. And I was able to see this live and in real time. And she just wove these things together really, Great. I do think that it's a combination of being able to do this as a discipline, but also it's also a natural skill, and being able to do those both together, the kids really benefit tremendously. So I agree with Miss Gilmore. If you can combine two different things together and cross them over, these interdisciplinary areas, it is well worth the effort, and the kids benefit tremendously. Another question that was asked was, what would you change about the lesson planning process at your school? I think for Miss Gilmore, her theme on this was time. She feels that there is not enough time to given to teachers to build a lesson plan. And she said, in a perfect world, you would have more time to lesson plan. It's a very busy day, and there's an enormous amount of expectation on us. And I agree. I work at the same school. There is an enormous amount of expectation. I don't feel like I have enough time to lesson plan. However, it's the nature of a teacher and the career of teaching. And so we have to figure out ways to make it happen because we know that it is very important. In Miss Diane's response to this, she said that no matter how much time you don't have, you have to lesson plan because this is your guide. Of course, in all of the mix of being flexible in it, but this lesson plan is what's guiding you to your end goal. So no matter how busy you are, lesson plan, which I thought was really great advice from her. The next question we talked about was, how does lesson planning make your teaching more effective? Miss Gilmore said that her lessons and executions have gotten better over time and with experience. And so if she is able to think about it and spend time thinking about it, she's better able to execute her lesson plans. And Miss Diane said organization for her is key. It helps you to know the goals that the school and the administration wants you to accomplish in your grade level. She plans at 2 months ahead of time, a week ahead of time, and a day ahead of time in the way that she organizes her notes. So for her, organizing based upon times and goal is very important. Another thing we talked about is collaboration with other teachers on lesson plans. And Miss Gilmore collaborates with the other two grade 2 teachers, which includes Miss Height. They collaborate mostly in language arts. They do a little bit of collaboration in science and social studies, but most of the collaboration is in language arts. I was on one of those collaboration teams last year for the 3rd grade, and you meet together weekly. You discuss one of the books that is in the 3rd grade reading plan, and the teacher that's teaching that book talks about the things that have worked, the things that have not worked, suggestions of how to teach it, vocabulary, key vocabulary, strategies. So it was a very useful time for all the teachers to be able to get insight into how to teach that book, as well as sharing resources. They could be book study packets. And so that is one of the things that both the teachers talked about that I can follow up and say, yes, there is quite a bit of collaboration done at our school with lesson plans. They also talked about reusing lesson plans and how to accommodate for differentiation. Miss Gilmore uses lessons that she planned last year with her students. She said, however, because this year's student is a completely different group, she's had to change her lesson plans and accommodate for the differences among this year's class. And Miss Height, she said that she reuses some of her lesson plans. However, there have been so many changes in the curriculum from year to year that she's kind of had to start over several times. For example, this year there's a new math book, and so she's had to completely recreate lesson plans. So one of her pieces of advice is don't be so connected and focused on your own lesson plan that you're not going to be able to let it go, because things like this must happen. I can agree with this because last year I taught mostly ESL special class, which was topical for first grade, and language arts for first grade. And the rest of them were intensive intervention classes. This year, we've added second grade language arts, third grade language arts, and fourth grade language arts leveled groups. And so I've had to almost completely rearrange my teaching schedule and having new classes, which are reading classes for leveled groups. So I've had to create second, third, and fourth grade language arts class all in 1 year. So I have no lesson plans to reuse for those classes. And again, flexibility is important. One interesting question that was asked was, what has changed in the lesson planning process since you first became a teacher? For Miss Gilmore, she said initially she wrote down a lot of her lesson plans to the point where she even wrote scripts for questions, and she doesn't do that anymore. She said that, as you become more experienced as a teacher, it comes more naturally for you, so you don't need to write as many details. And Miss Height said that it was an easy answer for her: computers. She's been teaching for over 40 years, so they didn't use computers when she first started teaching. So technology was the biggest change. She said for her, the concept of Google Drive, even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, there was no concept for that. So a lot has changed for her. How to submit lesson plans. We submit our lesson plans electronically on Google Drive at our school. So this was their answer, and I do the same thing. Another question was, does someone check or approve your lesson plans? At our school, our principal administration does not check lesson plans. They check unit plans. And that is done at the first month of school. Another thing that we discussed was how curriculum has changed the lesson planning process. And for Miss Gilmore, she said definitely curriculum changes and affects the lesson planning process because you take your end standard and you work backwards. So it's that backwards planning that we just learned about the last couple of weeks in Teach Now. And Miss Diane talked about how the math curriculum changed, and so she's had to readjust a lot of things happening in that, as well as the curriculum with the changes of the leveled reading groups. Nearing the end, we just have 2 more to go. We also talked about reflecting on the effectiveness of lesson plans, how they document when they want to change something, and how the lesson planning has gone. Miss Gilmore said that she constantly reflects on what is happening during the lesson. And it's more of this, as it's happening, she's reflecting. And then immediately after the lesson, she is also doing some reflection. She says she doesn't tend to document what she needs to change, that she's really good at just remembering. And Miss Height, however, she's completely different in her approach to this. She writes down everything that she wants to change, and she writes her lesson plans in pencil, in different colored pencils. And so she will highlight things that she needs to change in her lesson plan for the next time. She will take notes on things that the children are struggling with during a certain section so that she knows for next time. And she said that she has done this her entire career for 40 years. She's very detail-oriented and organized, and this is what's helped her in her lesson planning. The last question talks about the best advice for new teachers in regards to lesson planning. Miss Gilmore had a very insightful answer. She talked about having an idea of what the end goal is and being able to look at that end goal and plan your lessons by the week. So again, the backwards planning and deciding how much time are you going to have for each of those units throughout the year. She talks about lesson planning for certain standards and then differentiating for the different students in the class because they're high achievers and they're those with the special needs and many of them with language issues, as a lot of them are ESL students. She said, don't get caught up on doing something in a specific time. And again, this would mean flexibility. Is if you need to take an extra week on a certain topic, then take an extra week. You can make up for it in other ways, in other times during the week or the next week. And don't worry too much if you have to divert an activity for a later time and go back to it. Always start with a good idea of an end goal, was her final point. And the last thing that I want to talk about is Miss Diane Height's last comments. This is her last year of teaching after 40 years, and so what she has to say is very insightful and very meaningful for advice for new teachers for planning. Let's listen to what she has to say.
My best advice is to do it, is to plan on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Yes, go out for a month, but also look at the whole year. That doesn't mean you're planning for the whole year, but you have objectives in mind as far as all the subjects go. You know, what do you want to cover? What should you cover? And then as you realize the class that you have, what do you need to change? Do I need to bring it up or do I need to bring it down? How much do I change? And so it isn't just sticking with that lesson plan. It's again that word flexibility that should be printed and put everywhere in a classroom. Be flexible, and that would be my advice to new teachers. Be organized, but also be very flexible. And flexible not just with the students, but flexible with administration, flexible with parents. This is probably off the subject, but realizing that there is no other job where the child is an extension of that parent's ego. And you are the teacher and you care about that child, and when it comes to academics or discipline, you still need to realize that that's a precious child. And please be flexible and be sensitive to a parent.
I'm not someone that writes detailed lesson plans for every single one of my classes, but I realized in this interview that even though I am incredibly busy every day, it is imperative that I put more effort into my lesson planning, not to cover myself or not to make myself look good, because those aren't what I'm after, but to make myself a better teacher so that my students are benefiting from that and learning and meeting their goals. And Miss Diane really inspired me with her plan it, do it on a daily and a weekly basis. And even though I do plan my outline, I really want to put more effort into the activities that I plan in those lessons. But, as she said, within flexibility. I want to plan ahead of time, a month, so that I have time to work towards that, to build my students towards those points. And the last thing she said was kind of a culmination point for all of us teachers. In the end, our students are an extension of the parent's ego, and what that means is that student is the most precious thing in that parent's life, and we need to treat those students as such, to be sensitive towards the parents, and especially sensitive towards the students and their needs. And sometimes it can be hard with the day-to-day busyness of school life, and we have certain problems here and circumstances and crises and kids doing this and that. But in the end, we are taking care of a life of a child, and we need to put everything that we have in us and all of our skills and our abilities to improve that child's life, that child's education. And that is our biggest job. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we get to do that, and it's an honor and it's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. Thank you for listening.